Arc 10, Chapter 16. Foul play, stranger. Subaru is, stranger. A Sin Archbishop. It was an absolutely incomprehensible suspicion. Even when said aloud once again as if to confirm, it yet remained incomprehensible. Incomprehensible to an extent such that, were it meant to throw them off and nothing more, then he could only laugh at what a great success it had been. However, the expression of the large man before him, of the individual called Marcos, was far too austere to be able to laugh off that incomprehensible suspicion as a jest. At the very least, for Garfield, entrusted with the position of chief military officer of the camp, there was not even an iota of a choice to let down his guard before this man. Garfield. Sniff, with a slight inhalation of his nose, Garfield caught a whiff of the weighty tension enveloping the royal residence. What he sensed was a will to fight held in control, apprehension and distrust that shook emotions, and concealed behind that, feelings of fear that possessed an acrid and irritating scent. Garfield had come to know this feeling in the air, which he had most recently had the chance to smell on many occasions in the Valatian Empire. An atmosphere like that of a warehouse jam-packed, full of fire magic stones approaching detonation. In other words, Garfield, you wanna have a go with our amazing selves. Marcos, does that mean you are denying our request? Garfield, huh, you're the ones who spat on us first, so don't you make a face actin' like we're the ones pickin' a fight. Stranger, wait, don't snap at him, Garfield, please. As his fangs gnashed in annoyance, Garfield, who had been glaring up from below at Marcos, was restrained by those words coming from Emilia behind him. Going so far as to append that please, Garfield had no choice but to withdraw his hostility. Adding a thank you for his understanding, Emilia then raised her head resolutely. Emilia, I apologize for this one of ours. I was really surprised, so I couldn't find the words to speak, and he was just getting upset on my behalf. Marcos, then are you just as angry as he is, Emilia-sama? Emilia, yes, that's right. After getting past my surprise over why you would say something so ridiculous, I'm feeling really irritated. I think I might be about to get angry. But Emilia cut off her words there, placing her hand upon her chest. She fiddled with the green magic crystal dangling there, as if doing so to arrange her thoughts via that hard sensation. Emilia, losing my temper here won't help Subaru's situation. It'd just be me getting angry because I want to be angry, and I don't think that would do any good. Marcos, you looked me in the eye and told me so quite plainly. Emilia, Marcos-san, we haven't talked much since our last conversation. This is who I am now, just a tad stronger than I was before. That, too, is thanks to Subaru. Marcos, faced with Emilia delivering an answer without being swept away by her emotions, yet also without allowing herself to be silenced, Marcos's eyes narrowed as he made a face that seemed conflicted. On the other hand, Garfield felt the blood that had risen to his head slowly descend as he listened to Emilia speak. Still, his body did not relax, nor would he allow it to. Stranger. To begin with, these so-called suspicions seemed to be nothing but nonsensical. Natsuki-san being connected to the witch cult, at the level of a Sin Archbishop, it is hardly funny. Stranger, that's right. Besides, just how many problems caused by the witch cult have been resolved by Subaru-sama. In particular, he even defeated a Sin Archbishop, saving me and everyone else in the village, and yet please don't say such strange things. Otto and Petra provided support, and Garfield also agreed with a yeah. The Sin Archbishops of sloth, greed, and even gluttony, all had been slain or otherwise captured in battles led by Subaru, dealing major blows to the witch cult. Adding on to that, Subaru had contributed in great part to the subjugation of both the white whale and the great rabbit of the three great witch beasts. This made something like Subaru being with the witch cult seem far too absurd a tale. Garfield surely ain't tryin' to say they got in a big scuffle as allies. Even if my amazin' self and Otabro got in a fight, ain't no way I'd beat Otabro to a pulp. We ain't gonna get in no fight in the first place, though. Stranger, while I'm unsure whether that anecdote about Garf and Otto-san is relevant, I do think such doubts are reasonable, and I can't imagine that person is someone capable of bearing such malicious intentions. Stranger, I know, right GHT. Oni-san certainly seems to want to take on lots of bothersome ta SKS, but I think the number one reason he does so is because he doesn't think about IT. Adding in the zinger from Rem, plus Meili who followed up, the opinions of the camp were in accordance with Garfield. It was the consensus of their side centered around Emilia. In response, Marcos, without even the slightest tremor upon that stony expression of his, Marcos, I acknowledge the tremendous trust that every member of your camp has placed in Knight Natsuki Subaru. That aside, I must request that Emilia-sama return to the castle once more. Emilia, should I tell the people at the castle what I just told you? Marcos, in addition to that, please answer our inquiries honestly. Out of consideration, I would like to impart upon you that the best means to dispelling the suspicions is to cooperate in any way you can in clearing them up. Emilia, Rem, excuse me, could I ask something? In response to Marcos repeating himself, making the same request he had at the outset, Emilia lowered her amethyst eyes in rumination. And there, Rem cut in. While maintaining a relentless vigilance towards the surrounding soldiers of the kingdom, just like Garfield, she made an inquiry. It was, Rem, is it okay that the one most important in all of this, that Natsuki Subaru is not with us? In an instant, the atmosphere surrounding the soldiers of the kingdom changed completely at that question. Soldiers, the emotions directed by those surrounding them turned pointed, and Garfield's hair stood on end. Although no swords had physically been drawn, the domineering gazes of the soldiers upon the parlor of the royal residence still felt identical to staring down swords pointed at them. It had been a ripple of emotions, akin to water's surface remaining undisturbed just barely until it was trampled upon, leaving lingering undulations. It was an explosive situation in which even a single drop was liable to become the impetus for the bubble to pop. Marcos, calm yourselves. The turbulent emotions of the soldiers, by only a single phrase, nay, by a single phrase accompanied by an intense aura of swordsmanship, were swept away with a single explosion, compelling the ripples to yield by brute force. Garfield, hic! Suddenly experiencing a hallucination like that of being struck by a colossal, mountain-like palm, was Garfield. Every pore on his body opening due to the momentary sensation, he was forced into utilizing his rationality to suppress his instinct to activate his beast transformation. At the extraordinary power possessed by the source of that vast aura of swordsmanship, beyond compare to that which had been directed at him by the soldiers of the kingdom just before, shivers ran through Garfield's instincts. Marcos, the soldiers were terribly discourteous. To your military officer, I apologize once more for my impoliteness. Garfield, just to my amazing self. Marcos, I had intended to focus it just on the soldiers, but I hit you as well. I can see you have forged yourself quite considerably. Meeting eyes with Marcos, Garfield noticed that the rest of his comrades were frowning, wearing faces conveying their obliviousness to the aura he had felt just prior. It seemed to be just as Marcos had said, that the only ones who had perceived it really had been Garfield and the original target, the soldiers, and none else. Garfield came to a realization anew. Marcos Gildark, hiding in the shadows of the exceptionality of Sword Saint Reinhard van Astria, he was the apex of the Knights of the Kingdom of Lugunica, his true power no veneer. Emilia, your reactions just now seemed really strange. Can you answer Rem's question? Subaru and Beatrice, what are they up to? Ignoring Garfield, whose twin emerald eyes harbored dismay and caution, Marcos's face further darkened as Emilia narrowed her eyes pensively. Marcos, Emilia-sama, what do you know regarding the movements of Knight Natsuki Subaru? Emilia, today he's gone out due to a meeting with Miklatov-san. He went alone, rather, Beatrice went as well, making it the two of them, but since he had an appointment to talk, Marcos. Sir Miklatov McMahon has passed away. Emilia, huh? The report which had interrupted Emilia's speech possessed a far greater impact than merely rebuking her for the bluntness of her words, cutting through the atmosphere of the parlor. Naturally, Garfield knew Miklatov McMahon's name. Not only had Subaru and Beatrice gone to meet him, but he was also a famous individual involved in the royal selection. Being that he was a central figure of the Council of Wise Men, it was impossible to not be surprised when hearing of his demise. However, The real shock resulted from the words that came after. Toward Garfield and the rest, whose confusion had yet to subside, Marcos pressed his onslaught further. He said, Marcos, presently, the kingdom is pursuing the whereabouts of Knight Natsuki Subaru, as well as the royal candidate, Duchess Crush Karsten, under suspicion of conspiracy and involvement in the death of Sir McMahon. Emilia. Wait, what do you mean? Subaru and Crush-san? Involved in Miklatov-san's death? Marcos. The sword wound upon Sir McMahon's remains recovered from the scene of the crime were in accord with a comparison to a knight's sword bearing the crest of House Karsten. There was also a report that Sir McMahon fell by the hand of Duchess Karsten, and Knight Natsuki Subaru assisted in her escape. Garfield. Wah, hic. At the violence in that report, enumerated in an orderly fashion, Garfield experienced vertigo for an instant. Not only had this important individual named Miklatov been murdered, the perpetrator had been Crush, with Subaru's assistance. He could only feel that it was far too absurd a false accusation. Garfield. That Duchess-san, hic. Setting aside the ridiculous suspicions upon Subaru, Garfield could not find it credible, suspecting Crush of turning to such heinous violence. The only time Garfield and Crush had interacted with each other was for but a mere day and a half in the Watergate City. However, they were comrades who had stood shoulder to shoulder in that battle, fighting together against the witch cult to save the city. He knew that she was someone who truly could wield a sword in order to save another, and he had wholeheartedly wanted to do something about the price she had paid for it. Garfield had not been a personal witness to Crush's body being restored by the power of the so-called sacrament of the Church of the Divine Dragon, but regardless of the various circumstances surrounding the royal selection, upon hearing of that happening, he had simply felt relief. That Crush had turned to violence and Subaru had assisted in it. Such foolishness. Otto, allow me to confirm. By saying you are pursuing their whereabouts, does this mean that Natsuki-san and Crush-sama are currently at large? Abruptly, a question flew out that attempted to appropriately verify the present situation, in a voice stifled of emotion. Needless to say, the one to do so was Otto, the foundation of wisdom within the camp. Trying to subdue her discomposure, Emilia turned her amethyst eyes toward Otto. Emilia, Otto-kun, Otto, it is important. The reason why the commander of the Knights went out of his way to pay a visit here is probably less an indication of respect toward Emilia-sama and more out of caution. Rem. By caution, you mean they think Emilia-san or one of us will go on a rampage? Otto. Likely, that is not entirely out of the question, but the primary cause for concern would be us meeting up. This detachment is here out of precaution, in case they were to join us and we sheltered them. Am I incorrect? Marcos, since giving an explanation of the intent behind this deployment is a matter of military secrecy, I am unable to provide you with an answer. Otto, I see. Not denying it is more than enough. As Garfield tried to knead the fury and agitation churning within himself and transform it into something harmless, he could only feel reassurance from Otto, who nodded in agreement with Marcos's answer. In times such as these, he was earnestly glad Otto was present, because he could trust Otto to skillfully sort out the game board, even one as intricate and full of many tangled motives as this, and pass along the necessary information. Garfield could devote himself to his role as a shield. Here, too, Garfield decided to stick to that trust, without being misled by superfluous emotions. Rem, the passing of the individual you call Sir McMahon, and the suspicions that that person may be a member of the witch cult, they seem to be related, and yet at the same time not. So then, regarding what you want to hear from Emilia-san, say what you like, but, Marcos, I have already told you, the best means to resolve these suspicions is to answer our questions at the royal castle. If you refuse to do so, we would have no choice but to take that as Emilia-sama and her camp abandoning their accountability regarding the suspicions against Knight Natsuki Subaru. Petra, is that not coercion, ignoring Emiliani-sama's intentions and such? Marcos, it is not coercion. That said, if you will not answer questions, then suspicions will remain suspicions, and the kingdom will merely determine its stance toward Knight Natsuki Subaru. Everyone. His low voice still bereft of emotion, Marcos continued to make the same unchanging request. Whether one pushed or pulled, it was impossible to move him, he who stood stalwart as if truly a mountain. Just as the air of such impatience was beginning to proliferate on both sides, Emilia, "I understand. I will go to the castle. Let me speak about Subaru there." Marcos, a prudent judgment. Petra, "In that case, I will prepare immediately." Disliking the stagnation and the coming collapse of the situation, Emilia decided to comply with the request, yielding a nod from Marcos. With animosity toward that demeanor in her eyes, Petra tried to take action in preparing to go to the castle. However, with a no, Otto stopped Petra. While he narrowed his eyes, after nodding at the wide-eyed Petra, Otto, "We must carefully choose who to accompany her to the castle, is that right?" Marcos, you have keen insight. Straight to the point. Emilia, "What do you mean?" The gazes of Otto and Marcos collided, prompting Emilia to raise her well-shaped eyebrows. In response to Emilia's question, Marcos, maintaining the straightness of his tall spine, Marcos, "Emilia-sama will be attending the castle, but everyone from your camp accompanying her would not be acceptable. The apprehensions befalling Knight Natsuki Subaru at the current time could very well extend to the entirety of Emilia-sama's camp. In order to maintain the independence of testimony, we would like to ask you to restrict it to one attendant to care for personal affairs." Emilia, "Only one attendant?" Marcos, "We apologize for the inconvenience, however. I beseech you cooperate." Possibly anticipating their surprise, Marcos's demeanor remained unshakable. Garfield glanced at Otto, surmising that the latter had also expected this reply from the slight frown upon the face of the one he considered his older brother. The issue was that, though predicted, it yet remained undoubtedly a serious blow to the camp. Garfield, at the very least, my amazing self can. Marcos, "I would not recommend that. I understand your desire to act as a guard as a military officer. However, you are more than capable of serving as an immediate asset in battle. If Emilia-sama, in the midst of a maelstrom of suspicions surrounding her, were to visit the castle accompanied by a military asset, it would not be for the purpose of an explanation, but rather as a show of force." Garfield, "That's a baseless accusation." Marcos, "I am saying that there are those who would take it that way." Stringing words together, the other party in the conversation continued to suppress Garfield's intentions. He wished to evade it somehow, but since even Otto had not interjected, it meant his argument was sound. "However, Garfield, if we're talking attendance, with the current state of their camp, the only two options that came to mind were Petra and Rem. Had Frederica been present, the best option would have probably been to leave it to her, his elder sister, but that was asking for the impossible now. It was difficult to entrust Emilia to Rem when the latter's memories had yet to return, and although Petra was quick-witted, to leave her to a situation of this level brought him anxiety. Just what in the world would be the best thing to do? Upon that thought of his, it happened. "Stranger, then it is settled. Ram shall go with Emilia-sama." Garfield, "Hick Ram." Saying this, Garfield's eyes widened as he saw Ram appear at the entrance to the parlor. Having changed into her familiar maid outfit and possessing her usual strong-willed expression, Ram appeared, causing not only Garfield, but also Emilia and everyone else to be unable to hide their surprise. After all, Ram had been purportedly resting, her state that of being practically bedridden due to the heavy workload she'd had, starting with the trip to the Pleiades watchtower. She was not supposed to join them on their planned trip to Prestella, and would instead wait for the return of Garfield and the others in the royal capital. She had risen to her feet and stood beside Emilia, looking shockingly dignified. Without pause, Ram lifted the hem of her skirt and curtsied before speechless eyes. "Ram, apologies for the tardiness. On account of Ram's duty to check the softness of the beds, there was a delay in noticing the arrival of our esteemed guests." Emilia, "Is the feel of the beds okay now?" Ram, "Indeed. It's around a passing grade." Slightly shrugging her shoulders, Ram responded as such, lacking a hint of fatigue upon her countenance. However, it was plain to see that she was simply skilled at regularly hiding her burdens, and had not truly recovered. Since the exchange just now with Emilia had also reworded Ram's physical condition as the condition of the beds, there certainly was some apprehension remaining. And yet, Ram, Nisama, Ram, Rem, the group of leftovers, is entrusted to you. All of them would not last without the cute and capable Ram and Rem sisters. Only Petra is somewhat better than the rest. Rem. Yes, I understand. At the words of Ram, who naturally decided to take on that role, Rem managed to grasp her elder sister's worry and apprehension, and while attempting to stifle tears from arising in her pale blue eyes, she nodded. During that exchange, Garfield glanced over at Otto. To some degree, the act could be construed as a unilateral decision from Ram, but Otto's judgment. Otto, I agree, I believe Ramson is suitable. Can we entrust Emilia-sama to you? Ram, those words are needless. You are the one who needs to shape up, Otto. You too, Garf, do your best at being put to work. Garfield, ain't no need to tell me that. Emilia and Rem, as well as Otto, all respected Ram's judgment, and treating those words from her as being entrusted to them, they responded resolutely, yet Garfield's voice was stained with weakness. Of that, Garfield was ashamed, but as Ram narrowed her light crimson eyes, Ram, truly a fool. And like so, she pushed away Garfield's weakness with a sweet strictness. Emilia, everyone, we're heading out. I'll clear up these misunderstandings about Subaru real good, and explain things so that everyone will understand. And like that, once it became unanimous amongst the camp that Ram would accompany her as an attendant, Emilia, having gathered her resolve to visit the castle, proclaimed thus, gazing upon the faces of Garfield and everyone else. In all honesty, the situation was utterly unparalleled in absurdity. With such an atmosphere about, it was not a good omen that they were taking blows without getting any of their own in. If this were a fist fight, allowing one's opponent to do as they pleased meant immediate defeat. In order to avoid such defeat, they had to figure out their opponent's designs, put a stop to those, and inversely, respond in kind by doing what they themselves wanted to do. Emilia, it's the same as always, but please let me borrow the strength of all of you. Please, I beg you. Saying so, Emilia bowed deeply, requesting this of the comrades in her camp. Despite being leader of their camp, a royal candidate, and holding a proper, laudable status, she could bow her head without hesitation and depend upon the strength of another regardless of that. That reason itself was why Garfield, no, why all her comrades in her camp wished to devote themselves to helping Emilia and Subaru. Therefore, Garfield, yeah, of course. Don't worry yourself, Emilia-sama. At the very least, so as to dispel the anxieties of Emilia and Ram, who were now headed to the castle, Garfield intentionally used a rousing voice and hoisted his fist in the air. Thus, the group sent off Emilia as she was escorted to the royal castle by Marcos and his men, taking Ram as her solitary attendant. Otto, everyone, please pack your belongings, preferably the bare essentials will do. We leave in 5 minutes. With that, Otto hastily broke the ice facing everyone left behind at the royal residence. After the soldiers left behind to guard the residence cleared out of the parlor, the immediate declaration to those of them left in the parlor, wishing to discuss matters privately amongst the members of the camp, caused Garfield to unwittingly peel his eyes. Garfield, 5 minutes you say, we ain't waitin' for Emilia-sama. Otto, indeed. The situation leaves no possibility of deferment. That goes for both the suspicions cast on Natsuki-san and their stringent disposition of urging Emilia-sama's attendance to the castle. Their purpose is obvious. Petra. That would be to eliminate her from the royal selection, right? Otto. Almost certainly. Otto responded to both Garfield's doubt and Petra's words, conceiving an astuteness in his normally soft features, hoisting a finger up with a please listen. Otto. The timing of it all aligns far too perfectly. On the very day Natsuki-san had a summon from Sir McMahon, there's an assassination that embroils him, and for the perpetrator to be Crush-sama, a royal candidate, larger forces are at work here. Rem. To eliminate Emilia-san and the other party altogether from the board. So what you're saying is that that person got used for that purpose, correct? Otto. From the information currently at hand, we have no choice but to surmise so. As for Crush-sama, the very moment she received a hand from the Church of the Divine Dragon, her continuation in the royal selection ought to have become difficult, but stranger. Why, I get that you have a lot of things to go on and on about, but we don't have much time on our hands, do we? Won't it be bad if that Roxanne comes ba CK? Interposing with her words, it was Meili who called a halt on the conversation that was on the verge of dragging on. Fitting with her three-strand braid, a word she had spoken had caused the tiny crimson scorpion perched atop her head to snip its pincers. Roxanne, perhaps referred to Marcos. She was correct that Marcos was presently escorting Emilia and headed to the royal castle, therefore absent from here. At present, the royal residence was surrounded by the kingdom's soldiers with orders to stand by. The fact of the matter being that Garfield and the others had acquiesced to having house arrest imposed upon them. However, Otto, there will be nothing we can do if we acquiesce to them. We move before Marcos-san comes. Rem, we are going to search for that person, correct? Otto, Natsuki-san and Crush-sama alike. Until we learn what befell those two and what they witnessed at the mansion of Sir McMahon, nothing will progress. Rem, will it be all right? To rely on that person. Otto, even if Natsuki-san is no good, Beatrice-chan is alongside him. The child accompanying him is far too reliable compared to the man himself, after all. A tiny grin peeking through his lips, Otto smiled at Rem in order to assure her. The ends of her eyebrows lowered. While she might not have felt relief in the depths of her heart, Rem accepted his solicitude. And as everyone progressively smashed their own apprehensions, Garfield slapped his cheeks with both of his palms. Garfield. Got it, my amazin' self's made up his mind. Otabro, even if our amazin' selves ain't here, Emilia-sama and Ram'll be. Otto. Free from danger, I am sure. They will not be allowed to inflict any harm upon Emilia-sama, a royal candidate, by throwing all sorts of legal procedures out of the window. They will likely observe those rules. Either way, from the point they summoned Emilia-sama to the castle, the only aim the other party could possibly have is to detain her. Garfield, TCH, aight. Then my amazin' self'll knock out all the guards. And in the meanwhile, Otto, it cannot proceed that way. Garfield, ha. Cracking his knuckles, Garfield augmented his fervor, only for Otto to shake his head before him. Garfield widened his eyes, stunned by the dampening of his ardor as Otto stared at him with an austere expression. Otto, the guards are only here on orders and are not our enemies. I would like to avoid wounding them. The ideal would be to not let them even draw their swords. What we ought to do is escape in order to prove our innocence, not to wage war. Rem, if we cause casualties, Emilia-sama's and Ni-sama's, and that person's standing will worsen. Otto, Priscilli. As Otto adjusted the brim of his hat, Garfield grated his molars at him. He understood. He understood the reasoning. He understood the reasoning, but Garfield could not envision what followed from that. Of course, should Marcos return, they would never be able to safely escape from the royal residence. But at the very least, at this moment they would be able to escape through sheer force. If even that were to be sealed off, then what in the world could they possibly? Otto, I'll have the bugs and birds listen in on the guards to learn where they're short in numbers. I could ask them to distract the guards as well. It still is not a certainty, but Petra. If that's the case, then I have an idea. Rem, really, Petra-san? Otto proposed his usual expedients through the use of his divine protection, and then did Petra raise up her hand, prompting Rem to widen her eyes and pose such an inquiry. Receiving it, Petra responded with a yes, balling her tiny hands into fists. Petra, I'm really angry right now. About Subaru being suspected, about Emiliani-sama being scrutinized, and about Ramni-sama being forced to overdo herself. That's why I'll absolutely never do as the other side says. Garfield, that's scary reliable, but what do you plan on doing? Petra, of course, I have a plan up my sleeve. It's Otto-san's specialty. Otto, my specialty? His name was incisively called, but Otto tilted his head with an expression lacking even the faintest clue. On the other hand, Petra's cheeks dyed red in excitement, appearing to be brimming in confidence for her plan. Meili. Petra-chan, what exactly are you planning, NG? Petra. Meili-chan, Garf-san, you both know this too. Listen, beckoning them closer, Petra had everyone draw their faces near, as she stoutly expounded on the particularities of the plan she had up her sleeve. It was, stranger, it's a fire. There rose the alarmed voices of royal soldiers, a panic blazing throughout the royal residence. That which they had sighted was dense smoke flooding out from the kitchen with tremendous vigor. Faced with the large quantity of smoke spewing forth, accompanied by heat and the acrid smell of burning, many of the courageous soldiers moved to take action immediately. Charging into the kitchen to ascertain the source of the fire, they made haste to pinpoint the cause of the smoke. Moving to put out the fire, their goal was to extinguish both the flames and the panic at once, depending on the situation. However, stranger, the fire started under the floorboards, and the origin of the smoke is the blocked-off chimney. Extinguishing it won't be easy. With those words, the one to propose the fire alarm strategy and devise the plan in detail, Petra, deepened her smile as she listened to the panic unfold exactly as she had intended. It was a smile that would generally be described as sweet, but seeing it up close, Garfield could not help but feel chilled to the bone for some reason. In any case, stranger, though I just cannot quite accept that you consider burning down buildings to be my specialty. Regardless of Otto's complaints, the fire alarm strategy had been a brilliant success. In order to prevent harm from befalling the important facility that was the royal residence, as well as the relevant parties placed under house arrest within, the royal soldiers pursued swift countermeasures against the smoke, diverting their attention away from the movements of Garfield and the others. In the meantime, Garfield, sorry about this, but go and take a lil nap, will ya? Rem, I'm sorry. I bear you no grudges aside from the matter with Nisama. Stranger. Hick. Garfield and Rem each took on one of the two soldiers who had been kept stationed on guard duty at the back door as a minimum precaution, choking them unconscious to secure a path. They would allow no weapons to be drawn. Satisfying the conditions Otto had set beforehand, Garfield exchanged glances with Rem before they shared in a nod. Then, with Otto, Petra, and Meili in tow, they made their way out of the building. Meili, though if you wanted to cause a ruckus, I could have taken care of it with my witch-beast chans in any number of wah-wahs. Petra, that alone is an absolute no-go. If Meili-chan were to call her witch-beasts here and have them run wild, it would only bolster the rumors about us. That Subaru is a Sin archbishop of the witch cult, that Emilia-sama has ties to the Witch of Envy, that Meili-chan rampages with witch-beasts, and that Otto-san burns down every building he sees. Otto. As for that last one, though this was the case previously at the mansion too, I have the rebuttal that it was not solely my fault, since Petra-chan was right there alongside me. Meili. Setting Otto Oniason's disposition aside, I understand ND. With her skirt fluttering in the wind as she dashed with pitter-pattering steps, Meili gave a shrug of her shoulders. That being said, despite her airy attitude, Garfield believed that her words just now were probably just Meili's own way of expressing her frustrations. Meili possessed strength. However, were she to wield it, it would also end up jeopardizing the very people she wished to protect, a double-edged sword of sorts. The existence of a blade she could not swing was eating at her with a sense of vexation. Garfield, don't you worry. For whatever you're lacking, my amazing self'll work even harder. Running alongside Meili, Garfield reached over and patted her head. As soon as he did, Meili shot him a glare of reluctance, to which Garfield responded with a gnashing of his fangs. Garfield, with Otabro's ears and my amazing self's nose, will manage to track down where Captain is one way or another. Till then, that's right, cheerin'. We need cheerin'. How about you cheer us on? Meili. Cheering like deer be sent. Garfield. Exactly. Fact is, it's actually really damn empowerin' to be cheered on. Meili wore a look of skepticism, but for Garfield, that was a sensation he knew well. To be specific, in Prestella, the very place they were supposed to be headed, the only reason Garfield had been able to trade blows against the corpse soldier-turned-Atarms Korgan, as desperate as the battle had been, was thanks to the cheers of his little brother and sister present there. That, and those of the citizens filled with hope, uplifted by the speech given by Subaru. Indeed, that was so. Garfield had emerged victorious there due to the power of those cheers. And the willpower that had allowed them to cheer had emerged due to none other than Subaru having roused the people's spirits. It had been the result of Natsuki Subaru wielding hope to paint over the despair laid out by the witch cult. Garfield, ain't no fucking way Captain's a Sin archbishop. feeling as though the figure of the one he so respected was being tarnished by a notion too ludicrous to even suspect. Garfield was truly, oh so truly infuriated. It was not only Pristella. From the sanctuary, where Garfield had lived together with his grandmother and the others, to Petra's home of Arlam village, which had been saved from the witch cult, to all the people who had participated in the subjugation of the white whale alongside Subaru. There were a great number of people who knew the innate goodness of Natsuki Subaru. And among them, the one who most firmly believed in Subaru was none other than Emilia. From what Otto had said, the summons for Emilia to the castle had the objective of detaining her from the very start, with the hearing to clear up the suspicions surrounding Subaru being nothing more than a pretext. And yet, supposing the other party truly did have the intention of trying to clear up the doubts regarding Subaru, nobody could pour the entirety of their soul into their words for it quite like Emilia would. Garfield. Fucking shit. Frustrating. Frustrating. Just plain frustrating. Frustrating and frustrating, the frustration was unending. Had Subaru not done his best? Wishing to stand by the one he had fallen for, Emilia, wishing to protect the hearts of everyone together with him, had he not earnestly and fervently tried his very best? And yet, why would they not listen to the voices who knew of Subaru's efforts? If they had just granted them that opportunity, it would have been made clear. The fact that Natsuki Subaru would always struggle endlessly onward in the attempt to make his own outrageous ideals come true, that he was the greatest, coolest big brother figure Garfield could ever be proud to have. Melee Garfoniuson. Garfield. Hicks nothin'. Korgon felled his foes even if it meant losing his arms, you know. My amazin' self can't keep Bane so hesitant either. He had intended on cheering up Melee, but instead had just ended up getting choked up himself. So clearing those sentiments away with a spirited voice and a gnash of his fangs, Garfield looked straight ahead. Observing his state, Melee narrowed her eyes slightly. Melee. Truly, you really are all Subaruoniuson and Emilia Oneesson's companions, aren't you? And she muttered words that resonated as naught but praise to Garfield. Rem. Otto-san, what is the plan from here? Leaving Garfield and Melee to their exchange, Rem pulled up alongside Otto at the front as they ran forward and posed him that question. In response, Otto guided the group forward, saying, "This way, Otto. For now, I wish to lay low so that our trail cannot be pursued. It will not be long before our escape is discovered. We need to leave the Noble District immediately, and for that purpose, I am relying on their help." Rem, I see. Selecting small alleys and routes with cover, Otto led the way after fleeing from the royal residence. Ahead of Otto's gaze, those familiar insects were sneakily scurrying once more. Hearing that they were relying on such creatures, Rem paused before uttering words of acceptance. In the past, Garfield had also gone through a bitter experience because of them, so regarding Otto, who did business with these insects, primarily Zata bugs, he had some quite unpleasant memories. But then again, as allies, there were no people, nor insects, more reliable than these. Otto, if we get caught at a checkpoint, we are out. And so Garfield, gotcha, the two of you hang on tight. Petra. Kaya, at Otto's call, Garfield scooped up Petra and Melee from beside him, and tucking one under each arm, he kicked off the wall in front of him. The sturdy bulwark that separated the royal capital's noble district from the commoner district, and vaulted over to the other side. It was a wall meant to serve a vital role in the security of the royal capital, but with Garfield's leg strength, clearing it was a walk in the park. Garfield, keep waitin' here for a sec. I gotta go get Atabro and Rem as well. Petra, I understand the hurry, but Garfsan, you can't just snatch up girls all of a sudden like that. You really gave me a fright just now. Garfield, on. Why are you worried about such dumb, quit it with the scary eyes? Fine, I get it. With it seeming like quite a big deal to her, Garfield felt a sense of dread from Petra's icy glare and apologized. Then, with a running start, staring upwards in preparation to cross over the wall once more, Rem. My apologies. We crossed it without your help, Garf. Saying that, Rem dropped down right in front of him, to which Garfield's eyes widened. Part of that was at the fact that she had managed to surmount this wall, but what came as an even greater shock was Melee. Otto-oniuson, you actually managed not to screa Otto. It came dangerously close to that, though. Remsan, please let me down. Natsuki-san would murder me after all. Rem, ha. Why is that person's name coming up all of a sudden? I haven't the slightest idea what you mean. Otto, although that's exactly the kind of thing someone who does know would say. Being glared at by Rem as she carried him in her arms, Otto raised such a scream. Once she finally set him down onto the ground, Petra and Meili began to tease him. Looking over that, Garfield heaved a deep sigh before suppressing the surge of emotions that he felt moments before. Beyond any doubt, the situation was bad. Perhaps it was even worse than when they had been caught up in the Empire's civil war. But Subaru was surely safe together with Beatrice. Emilia, too, would be acting to the best of her ability without being reckless thanks to Ram being with her. And the ones present here, Otto, Rem, Petra, and Meili, were all dependable. He would support them. The situation was bad, but he could still smile. And so long as they could still smile, it meant they were not truly backed up against the wall just yet. Garfield, Atabro, my amazing self'll carry you next time we have to jump. Otto, yes, I would be happy to hold you to that. Garfield, gotcha. So where to from here? You said something about hidden for a bit, but Otto, indeed. For the time being, I will lead us somewhere without many P. Shaking his head side to side, Otto, who had been surveying the surrounding area, cut his words off there. Blinking his eyes, his gaze darted frantically between all of the buildings and covers nearby the bulwark. Smelling an unconceivable fretfulness therein, Garfield, Atabro. Otto, gone. Garfield, Atabro. What do you mean gone, Otto? The Zada bugs. No, not just the Zada bugs. Even outside the Zadas, all the insects that had been guiding us until now, they are all gone. Do not tell me. His eyes wide with realization, Otto turned not towards cover, but back around towards Garfield and everyone else. His expression was tense, and as his voice was scorched with rising panic, he grabbed Garfield by the arm. And then, Otto, I messed up. I do not know how, but the insects deceived me. Petra, the insects deceived Otto-san. Is that even, Otto? It is possible. We were lured here. If this continues, there will be no escape. We need to get out of here as soon as, with the safety he had taken for granted being utterly violated, Otto was in a state of utter disbelief. Yet he raised the utmost worst-case scenario to his allies. Hearkening that, Garfield's mind on the brink of dumbfoundment was roused into motion, and immediately prepared to move in accordance with Otto's command. Stranger, that will be as far as you go. It was precisely at that moment that the worst possible pursuer finally caught up to them.